The Lord reigneth, let the people tremble. He sitteth between the cherubims, let the earth be moved. The Lord is great in Zion, and he is high above all the people. Let them praise thy great and terrible name, for it's holy. The king's strength also loveth judgment. Thou dost establish equity. Thou executest judgment and righteousness in Jacob. Exalt ye the Lord our God, and worship at his footstool, for he is holy. Moses and Aaron among his priests, and Samuel among them that call upon his name, they called upon the Lord, and he answered them. He spake unto them in the cloudy pillar. They kept his testimonies and the ordinance that he gave them. Thou answerest them, O Lord our God. Thou wast the God that forgavest them, though thou tookest vengeance of their inventions. Exalt the Lord our God, and worship at his holy hill, for the Lord our God is holy. Well, this is the millennial reign of Christ. Today, 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 10, that is the day of days on God the Father's calendar. Naturally, he is going to give it more space, time and attention than anything else in his book. Our day is the day that God's Son laid down his life for us, but that is not the day that interests the Father. The day he wants to see is when his Son receives what rightfully belongs to him: glory, honor, power, strength, dominion, and worship, or as the heavenly host put it, worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. Revelation chapter 5 verse 12. He sitteth between the cherubims. God is sitting there now. See Revelation chapter 4 verses 6 to 9. The mercy seat was called a seat for some reason. Numbers 7 verse 89. And since Satan intends to enter the temple in Jerusalem and sit down, 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 4, why would he not sit down in the place reserved for God? After all, that was his intention when he was a cherub. Isaiah chapter 14 verse 13, Ezekiel chapter 28 verse 14. Didn't any of the commentators know that Satan has a seat? Revelation chapter 2 verse 13. God sat between two cherubims in the tabernacle in the wilderness, for that is the place from where he commanded with Moses. Exodus chapter 25 verse 22. When Jesus Christ returns, he is pictured as sitting between the cherubims. Ezekiel chapter 1 verses 20 to 28. We can easily say that not any commentator from 1611 and before until this day 2022 could find the scriptural application of the verse. There are two phases to Christ's return. One of these is pictured as a man seated on a threshing machine of some kind, which has wheels and cherubims. The seated driver is on a machine that is excellent in working, and it grinds everything under it to pieces. Isaiah chapter 28 verses 27 to 29. The other picture is a leader of cavalry on a white Arabian charger composed of fire. Revelation chapter 19 verse 11. The references for these pictures of the second advent are in Joel chapter 2 verses 1 to 12, Habakkuk chapter 3 verses 9 to 16, Revelation chapter 19 verse 10 to 15, and 2 Samuel chapter 22, Isaiah chapter 63 verses 1 to 6, and Ezekiel chapter 1 verses 2 to 26. When these things take place, the people tremble, literally, and the earth is moved, literally. For all that you and I know, the literal cherubims will be actually standing around the throne of David when Jesus Christ sits down on it in the millennium. After all, the prayer was, Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done in earth as it's in heaven. Matthew chapter 6 verse 10. And that's a good location for the prayer of our Father. Well, the answer can be, bless my soul in heaven, Revelation chapter 4 verses 6 to 9. The cherubims are around the throne, Revelation chapter 5 verse 6. The by now familiar judgment and righteousness show up again, verse 4, as in Psalm chapter 9 verse 8, chapter 33 verse 5, chapter 37 verse 6, and 72 verse 2. The equity of verse 4 is the equity of the preceding psalm, Psalm chapter 98 verse 9. The word means in a correct or upright fashion. Verse 5. His footstool is the earth. There is no reference to anything heavenly, as the Calvinist put it. See Psalm chapter 110 verses 1 to 3 and Matthew chapter 5 verse 35. This footstool is located at a specific place on this earth at his holy hill. Verse 9. His name is holy, verse 3. He is holy, verse 5. And his hill is holy, verse 9. It's holy because he is sitting on it. 3 priests are mentioned in verse 6. Moses is included because he, like David, was a prophet, priest and king. It's Moses who offered the first sacrifice in the tabernacle, Exodus chapter 40 verse 27, before Aaron called upon the Lord and he answered them, verse 6. Furthermore, he forgave them, verse 8. God didn't speak to Samuel in the cloudy pillar, although the house of the Lord could be filled with the cloud at times. Notice 1 Kings chapter 8 verse 10. Though thou tookest vengeance of their inventions, verse 8. The statement emphasizes the great New Testament truth which says, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God, Romans chapter 3 verse 23. Moses lost his temper, murdered a man, and then disobeyed a direct order from God. Exodus chapter 2 verse 12, Numbers chapter 20 verse 11. These inventions prevented him from entering the promised land. Aaron, believing that government of the people and by the people should be for the people, succumbed the mob rule and built the Golden Gulf, an invention, if you ever saw one, Exodus chapter 32 verses 1 to 6, and consequently experienced what Moses experienced. Both of them died without entering the promised land. Samuel, one of the most godly men who ever lived, appointed his sons as judges in Israel, 1 Samuel chapter 8 verse 1, when they were not fit to be lawyers, 1 Samuel chapter 8 verse 3. The bitter fruit of this was a demand from the people for a king. In turn, was one of the greatest types of the son of perdition found anywhere in the scripture. They chose a murderer who was a suicidal maniac. Thou tookest vengeance of their inventions. We have commented already on verse 9. The last clause is perfectly apparent.